It was very challenging, but it was also really, really satisfying and fun, kind of as a filmmaker and then also as a movie lover, to be able to kind of look back at these decades that all had kind of amazing slasher movies and say, how can I pay homage? How can I like send my love letter to these? And then also, like you said, keep our core kind of 90s storyline propelling things forward. And so it really just ended up in always coming back to the characters, coming back to the experience of kind of our, love story with Dina and Sam, and figuring out how everything could be anchored around that as we drove forward.
It was a hot June night when my brother and I finally decided to watch this little movie that you might have heard of called Fear Street. And you know what? I loved it. I almost binged the other two, but I had to hold myself back and watch the other two the following night. The movies ended up being so fun and campy that it made the 7-year-old in me who used to reenact the fight between Freddy vs. Jason and binge horror movies every Halloween jump with joy. And if I'm being honest, I really haven't liked horror films or films like this in a while. And to understand why, we're gonna have to jump back to July of 2019. It was summer of 2019, before the world fell apart, and I was working at a movie theater for the sole reason of free movies and getting posters. I was walking around when I noticed a poster for a movie that was going to come out soon called Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. My coworkers and I had been talking about this movie for months, and we were so hyped for when it would finally release and we would get to watch it early like we usually would. So when I got home, I decided to do research on the film, and it led me down a rabbit hole that I would soon regret. If you didn't know, the film is based in 1960s Hollywood, and it also involves the tragic murder of Sharon Tate. Even though the final product subverted the expectations we had, I didn't know that. So when I went down the rabbit hole that involved Sharon Tate and saw the photos associated with the case, I'm not gonna lie, I cried. Now I was dreading watching this movie because if you know anything about Quentin Tarantino, he would make it bloody and brutal. So when I sat in that theater and the movie got to the part that I was dreading, my anxiety went through the roof, and my hands were gripping the chair, and my breathing began to become heavy. My mind was racing, and I couldn't handle it. This is the first time I had ever experienced anything like this, and then, it didn't happen. It was not at all what I thought it would be, but that still didn't change what I had just experienced. I know that this movie wasn't a horror movie, but it still caused me to avoid anything like this for the rest of the year. That included horror movies, scary videos, shows, or anything with suspense, really. Then, 2020 happened, and the world got scarier and very bleak. It caused that feeling that I had in the theater to become 10 times worse, and to be pretty much every day. And you may be asking, Tony, what does this have to do with Fear Street? And honestly, nothing. I just want to put you in my shoes and let you understand what my mindset was and why I was so hesitant to watch horror films for the last year and a half. When I finally decided to actually sit down with my brother and watch Fear Street, it had already been out for a few weeks, which meant the other two films in the trilogy had already been released. So I had to fight the urge to binge them all right then and there, and only watch Fear Street 1994. To my surprise, I loved it. I love the killers, the suspense, the gore, the characters, the cinematography, and the thing that drove me away from watching horror films or anything like this, the suspense and the mystery. It reminded me why I love these things so much by just enjoying this film. And I enjoyed it so much that the following night, me and my brother binged the other two, and I'm not gonna lie, I love them just as much. If you don't know anything about Fear Street, and you haven't watched the movies yet, the story revolves around a curse that has plagued the town of Shadyside, which has caused there to be serial killers throughout the town's history. This is contrasted by the neighboring town of Sunnyvale, which has no crime whatsoever. The beginning of the first Fear Street film is a love letter to the opening of Scream, having a character played by a very well-known actress get murdered, in this case, Maya Hawke of Stranger Things fame, giving us the first of many kills in this trilogy. The thing that really surprised me, though, was the characters. Usually characters in most horror movies are so badly written and are phoned in by most of the actors that it's very hard to care about them or what's actually happening to them. Dina, played by the amazing Kiana Madeira, and Sam, played by the lovely Olivia Scott Welch, are the heart of most of these films. Their chemistry is amazing with each other and with the rest of the cast. They drive the story for all three of the films, with Sam being possessed and Dina trying to figure out how to save her. The emotional scenes they share together are so good, but the one that drove me to tears was this scene in particular.
I confess. No. No, I confess!
If I had to say though, the second film, Fear Street 1978, was actually my favorite out of the three. Maybe it was the love that I have for campy, cheesy, old school slasher films. Maybe it was the fantastic acting from Emily Rudd, who plays Cindy, and Sadie Sink, who plays Ziggy. Maybe it was the fantastic soundtrack giving me nostalgia for simpler times, or it was the amazing score that gave me a foreboding mood the entire time I was watching. What I think it is though, was the relationship of Ziggy and Cindy. Being an older brother to a younger sibling that you want nothing but the best for, and personally, I would say that I'm like Cindy, being super optimistic and wanting to do something better, and being just like Ziggy, who's super doom and gloom and just sees the world as a dead end. So honestly, it was so heart-wrenching to watch their tragic ending. And honestly, I have to give credit to all the actors, writers, and the director Lee Jeniak for how the films turned out. From all the interviews I've seen of her, she has so much passion for how she wanted to tell this story, from the romance of Dina and Sam to the commentary of how the world once was, and showing us that the world has come a long way. The way she did this was by making the characters that would be killed off first in the OG slasher films the center of their own story. You can also see the love and passion for horror films that she and most of the cast has, referencing old school slasher films as inspiration and even getting tattoos of some of their favorite horror movies. The love and care that went into making these films can be seen. I may be giving these films too much praise, but they aren't perfect films. If you really sit there and think about how the curse in the films work, their logic starts to fall apart. From why the killers even decide to attack random people who have nothing to do with the reason the main cast is being attacked, to how they are able to even figure out what happened to cause all this. Also, the comedy in these movies gave me the MCU writing style vibes, making dumb jokes for the fun of it and undercutting dramatic moments, but there weren't that many, so it never really got annoying. Sometimes the pacing drags, and sometimes it feels super rushed. There are so many little reasons that I can tear apart these films, but the thing is, I still love them. We don't watch horror movies for groundbreaking stories with everything being artsy and perfect, not to say they can't do that. But most of the time, we just watch them to have goofy, gory fun. This is exactly what I needed when I sat down and watched these wonderfully done films that have great actors, music, cinematography, and homages that most horror fans will love. And while I was writing this script, it got me thinking, these films are a great way to introduce new horror fans into the more gory and violent ones. These movies were made for teens and young adults just like me. I've been watching horror films since I was a kid, and maybe I just have a soft spot for these kind of films. And if you were to ask me, these are the next generation of horror films, made for the new generation. Yes, they can improve and have better stories and characters, but that won't change the fact that I loved Fear Street. Thank you guys for watching. This is honestly the first time I've attempted to make a video like this, so if you enjoyed it, please let me know, and I'll probably be doing more in the future anyway. So if you have any horror movies you want me to cover, or any horror movie creatures that you want me to talk about, please leave it in the comments below. Also, if you've seen the Fear Street trilogy, tell me what you thought in the comments below. I'd love to hear it. Thank you again, and I will see you in the next video.